Sempre lui. C'è questa grafica un po' vintage.
Siamo riusciti a trovare una soluzione per il passo. Sì, l'ho trovata.
Stamattina mi sono svegliato con un... Benissimo.
Per la scena?
No, penso di no, perché alla fine ho mangiato la stessa cottiglia di non mi si è sentito bene. Non so, però mi sono svegliato con la febbre alta, non faccio. Poi mi sono preso un po' di Nafil, un'aspirina. Lo sarà essere una cosa influenzale, un po' di freddo. Quanta gente se lo sta guardando?
La prima parte non ho mandato questo, posso registrare. Dovrò provare a registrare perché la commissione avrà cliccata, non sarà
Ieri quanta gente se lo guardava?
In totale sono stati una trentina di contatti, quindi capisti.
Sì, giustamente sì, cappato. Quante persone, vabbè.
Il 26.
Yes, just an information on the buses to the station and to the airport. Alessandra Caldini organized 2 buses, one at 1 o'clock that goes both to the station and to the airport, and one at 1:30 that goes again to the station and to the airport for those who want to stay here for lunch. So I think, Riccardo, we can start. Thank you.
Yes, I should announce that we will have a 4th speaker in our panel, Mr. Pierluigi Mazzella, who is the Italian representative of in the steering committee on media and information society within the Council of Europe. I think it's important to have the views on safety, including the Council of Europe, of course. So, let's start. I have a short presentation for you on safety. Safety in Europe. I would like to open the debate with a kind of tribute. In 2014, in Europe, 9 journalists were killed. The figure is high, 3 times more than in 2013. So here they are. Vyacheslav Veremey, killed on February 18th in Kiev, Ukraine. He was journalist for Russian newspaper Vesti. He has been attacked by the Titushki, a group of paramilitary working in collusion with security forces in Ukraine. Veremey was shot and fatally wounded in the stomach. Andrea Rocchelli and Andrei Mironov, killed on May 24th in Slavyansk, Ukraine. The Italian photographer Andrea Rocchelli and his Russian interpreter, Andrei Mironov, were killed while covering fighting between government forces and pro-Russian insurgents. They were hit by a mortar fire. Igor Korneliuk and Anton Voloshin, killed on June 17th near Lugansk, Ukraine. The Russian TV journalist Igor Korneliuk and his sound engineer Anton Voloshin were killed in a mortar attack near Lugansk, eastern Ukraine. They were hit during an attack of the Ukrainian forces on a separatist checkpoint. Anatoly Kilian, killed on June 30th in Donetsk, Ukraine. Anatoly worked as a cameraman for the Russian public television. He was fatally wounded in the stomach when the convoy he was traveling in came under fire from Ukrainian forces in Donetsk. Timur Kwashev, killed on August 1st in the Caucasus. Timur used to work as a correspondent of Dosh magazine. He covered abuses carried out by the security forces in the course of anti-terrorism operations. He had received threats, including death threats. In April 2013, he wrote about these threats in an open letter, saying he was concerned for his life. His body was discovered in a suburb of Nalchik in the Russian Caucasus. Andrei Stenin, killed on August 5th near Donetsk, Ukraine. The 33-year-old Russian photographer Andrei Stenin was found dead in a burned car. He had been killed when his car was hit by bullets and burned on the road near Donetsk. And Alexander Kyushinsk, killed on November 29th near Slavyansk, Ukraine. The 57-year-old senior journalist, editor of Criminal Express, a newspaper in Donetsk covering the crime news, was killed along his wife in a village near Slavyansk. The couple was knifed to death. Kushinsk has gained reputation from his investigations into the Donbass mafia. I think it's important to remind the memory of the victims as we are talking about safety. And of course, it's simply impossible to discuss about safety of journalists without mentioning the horrific attack on Charlie Hebdo. 9 journalists were killed, as I told you, in 2014. We should add 10 more murders of journalists and media workers in France early this year. The challenge now to prevent the escalation of anti-terrorist laws, to confront fear and to avoid hate speeches. It is our challenge now. The European Federation of Journalists does not want a society where journalists could only work under police protection. The only political response which is worthy of the Paris March is to consolidate our freedoms and democracy. The cooperation of journalist organizations, including the European Federation of Journalists, with the European Commission, with the OSCE, with the UNESCO and with the Council of Europe, to ensure better security for journalists is only the first step. Everyone now has the responsibility to step up the efforts in building safer working conditions for journalists. Okay, so I think it's important now to give the floor to the 4 main organizations, intergovernmental organizations represented here. I will start with Sylvie Coudray. I will give the floor to Pierluigi Mazzella, representing the Council of Europe, then Gabriele Bertoli, and finally Aidar Botagarov for the OSCE. So Sylvie.
Thank you. Maybe 2 remarks before explaining a little bit what UNESCO is doing. The first thing is that the figures that you have given now are quite horrible, and what you know that since 10 years now, more than 700 journalists have been killed around the world, and 9 of the 10 cases remain completely unpunished. So the question of safety and the issue of impunity is really at the heart of, I would say, the international agenda concern. And what was discussed this morning, the issue of good journalism, the issue of quality of journalism, journalism as a public good and public interest is completely linked also to the safety of journalists. Because if journalists cannot exercise their profession, all the discussion about public interest remains a little bit finalized. So why UNESCO? UNESCO, for those who don't know UNESCO, is the UN organization with a sole unique mandate working on freedom of expression, the free flow of information. And so in 2010, UNESCO takes the lead among the UN agencies to create a plan of action on safety of journalism and the question of impunity. The idea was to put together all the different stakeholders around the table, meaning the UN agencies, the member states, NGOs, and the judiciary, the police, at international, regional, and local level. Again, it was not the creation of a new mechanism. It was not the creation of creating a new bureaucracy, but to have a coherent approach among the different stakeholders at the international, regional, and national levels. So this is important to see this plan of action not as an event, not as an activity, but really as a process. So what are the main objectives? I would say maybe 4 or 5. The first thing was to make sure that at the normative level, member states and international and regional intergovernmental organizations make security, safety of journalists and impunity on the international agenda. And it has been the case because my colleagues from Europe are going to speak on what has been done at the level of the organization. But concerning international levels, the Human Rights Commission, the UN General Assembly and UNESCO have now developed a set of normative declarations, resolutions, decisions, which constitute a framework of our action, meaning that I know that some people are skeptical about the need of this kind of declaration, but you need to have a framework to make accountable member states vis-à-vis their commitment. So in 3 years, we had these instruments, and it's time now to see how the states are going to commit and make into actions their commitments. Second kind, and again, at the regional level, it has been done by the Council of Europe, by OSCE, and also by the holder of the special procedures. I'm thinking of OAS, also the UN rapporteur for freedom of opinion and freedom of expression, and the same at the African level. Another kind of activities where we try to concentrate the different efforts, it's awareness campaign. Awareness campaign through different celebrations, the World President Day, the World Radio Day, the World Women Day, because we know also that there are specific measures or specific actions that need to be taken concerning women journalists and the violence against women journalists. And also this question of this International Day to fight against impunity. Again, if we don't address the issue of impunity, the question of safety will never ever be solved. UNESCO is making, the Director General of UNESCO is making a report every year now, and is asking to member states, where are we with investigations concerning the killing of journalists? And it's also interesting to see the evolution of, at the beginning, maybe I would say a maximum of 10 member states were replying. And when I say replying, it doesn't mean that they were giving information. At least they were acknowledging receipt of the letter of DG. And now the process has become anchor, and more states are replying, but also are giving information, right or wrong, and this information is visible, meaning also that NGOs or professional organizations can use this information and go directly to member states to ask for further information. Capacity building is another aspect of this plan of action. And when I say capacity building, it means a lot of kind of activities. Just for your information, we are now developing a big project on freedom of expression and the security forces, meaning the police and the army. We had a pilot project in Tunisia, and I think the idea was to put together the journalists and the police and the army in order to make them understand what does it mean freedom of expression, how to behave in a demonstration, and how also for the police and the army to communicate with the journalists. Judiciaries, we have developed a massive open online course also in Latin America, first in Mexico, but now it's going to be expand in other countries. And the idea is the same, is to make sure that the judges, but the lawyers are sensitized to the issue of freedom of expression and safety, and the notion of protection of journalism. Other examples, we had some activities on media and elections, because we all know that during elections time, the safety of journalists is quite at stake, and other kind of activities which are multiple. Again, I have a report, and I can give you this report to show the mapping of activities that we are undertaking. Again, it's not UNESCO, it's the beauty of this plan, it's a plan of everybody. It's a plan of the state, it's a plan of the UN, it's a plan of NGOs. Last kind of activities that we have done, it's a kind of best sharing practice and research. We have launched several research on the violence against women journalists, on the digital safety, and also we have developed some indicators that could be used for baseline for the future. And this has been done now in 3 countries, and we are trying to expand in other countries. All in all, we have made a review of this plan, which is now have a life of 2 years. We have, of course, as it is a process, we have succeeded in some kind of activities or actions. Others are still need to be worked, and I'm thinking mainly at the local level. At the international and regional level, the mechanisms have been put in place, the issue of safety and impunity are on the agenda, but we need to really to commit much more the local authorities. Even though we have done some efforts, for example, in Pakistan, Nepal, or South Sudan, to put together all the different stakeholders at the local level in order to develop a national program. So I think I'm going to stop here. If there are any questions, I am available.
Thank you, Sylvie. You raised the important issue of fighting, the need to fight against impunity. Pierluigi, I know that the Council of Europe will launch soon a digital platform to report any violation of press freedom in the Council of Europe zone. Can you talk us? Can you tell us about your action, the action of the Council of Europe, and your specific committee on this issue of safety?
Thank you, Chair. I would not say that I am the fourth panelist because I joined the group at the last minute and I was not prepared.
You are welcome.
I have not prepared any organized speech. But because I'm here, I think that in this part that is more institutional, international institutional, I could say something. I take the floor, first of all, to present myself. I'm Pierluigi Mazzella, I'm a lawyer. In the past, I was executive, the director of a department in the AGCOM, that is the regulatory authority of communication in Italy. And since 2010, I am the Italian representative in CDMSI of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. This steering committee, that means on media information societies, oversees the Council of Europe's work in the field of media, information society, and data protection. I give you some information. Maybe you don't know. Some of you don't know. It advises the Committee of Ministers of the 47 member states on all questions within its area of competence, focusing, of course, on human rights protections, and especially on Article 10, and that is freedom of expression, and Article 8, that is right to private life of the European Convention on Human Rights. Just 3 words, I say, to inform you of the very last activities of the CDMSI on the topics of this final conference. Very interesting. I can underline this. The term of reference 2014 and 2015, so it ends this year, of the steering committee, among the other expect results lists draft text to be submitted to the Committee of Ministers on inter alia protection of journalism and safety of journalists, second, professional and ethical journalism, and personal data and the right to private life. So you see all the issues that has been covered by this final conference are on our table. Under the supervision of the CDMSI, works also a subordinate body, the Committee of Experts on Protection of Journalism and Safety of Journalists, in MSI JO, we call. For Italy, it's Elda Broggi of the European University Institute. The two committees together works taking account of the CM Committee of Ministers thematic debates and discussions, and also, this is to be stressed, on the UN Action Plan on the safety of journalists, which Sylvie has just spoken about. I can tell you now about the several decisions, recommendation, declaration of the Committee of Ministers on the Safety of Journalists. But of course, we saw before the definition of journalists of the Council of Europe. That is, I think, the largest in the debate. We take into account also the journalists, of course, but also others who carry out journalistic activities as blogger, as citizen journalists, as we want to call, or that perform the function, objective function of public watchdogs. So I can't list everything, but I want to tell you very quickly, very rapidly about two matters. The first, some events and initiatives. First, the acts adopted at the Belgrade Council of Europe Conference of Ministers responsible for media and information society. Second, and Riccardo was beginning with this, the memorandum of understanding on the setting up of an internet-based platform to promote the promotion of journalism and safety of journalists. First, in November 2013, it was subscribed by the competent ministers on media and communications of the 47 member states. A political declaration is a kind of framework, freedom of expression and democracy in the digital age, and 3 annex resolutions on specific issues. The resolution number 3 was on safety of journalists. It was reaffirming many things, but mostly that threats to safety of journalists must be dealt with as a matter of priority by all Council of Europe member states. The resolution 3 condemned physical attacks and violence, intimidation, misuses of the power of the state, and other forms of harassment of journalists. It resolves to take appropriate steps for ensuring the protection of journalists in terms of preventive measures and effective investigation. Going on, one concrete step on preventing measures, in the field of preventive measures, was the 4th of December 2014, just a month before the Charlie Hebdo attack in Paris. The stipulation of the Memorandum of Understanding between the Council of Europe and 4 partner organizations. There are International Federation of Journalists, Association of European Journalists, Article 19, Reporters Without Borders. So now we have, on paper, of course, an internet-based platform to document instances of violence against journalists, draw on information supplied by journalist organization, as Oxygen, I see here. The platform, in other words, allow the organization to publicize information subject to their own verification process and standards. and the content posted will be publicly accessible. On the other hand, the Council of Europe will draw up regular reports based on information submitted to the platform. I think that's enough for the moment, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Pierluigi. Concerning the platform, I have a good news. I think, as you said, the platform now exists in paper, but normally we will have the concretization of the platform in March. So
yes,
we hope it will be
go to Strasbourg, I think, in April, and this waited, yes, a concrete result. Yeah. Thank you.
We are trying to launch it as quick as possible, and it will be an important tool, I think, to name and shame the states, the governments not ensuring the protection of journalists. So we will talk now about the European Commission. Gabriele, you are dealing, Gabriele, with most of the projects of the European Commission on press freedom. You are dealing with several press freedom projects funded by the European Commission. So please tell us more about your action in this field.
Thank you, Riccardo, and thanks for inviting me here. The picture that you see there, Nous sommes Charlie, we are Charlie, is my starting point today. I know we will be discussing the Charlie Hebdo story with a different angle later on, but I would like to start from there, and specifically from what President Juncker said about this story. He said it is an intolerable and barbaric act which concerns us all as human beings and as Europeans. So yeah, President Juncker is my boss. I work indeed for the European Commission in the department called Converging Media and Content, and that is also responsible for media freedom and pluralism. So I see a strong European angle in this story for under three main aspects in particular, regarding values, the threat, and the reaction. So in terms of values, the values at stake, freedom, human dignity, the rule of law, and specifically freedom of speech, represent the very essence of the European project. And so there is a bit of a paradox there between a value such as freedom of speech that makes us so stronger. It is a clear economic, political, cultural, civic asset of our societies, but that is also fragile in a way, not as a value, but because it's subject to a number of threats, and of course cannot be taken for granted. So the tragic metaphor there is between the pencils at Charlie Hebdo and the weapons that confronted those pencils. The second point is the threat. So, of course, the threat to freedom of speech is global, but in this case, it had a clearly European angle, not just French, but again, European. Terrorism is now a particularly visible threat, but I would kind of warn not to, that this shall not kind of gloss over the day-to-day threats that the journalists face, that impact their ability to report the facts, to give their opinions, and to keep democracy lively and rich. So there are numbers of attacks on journalists, including in Europe, on their properties. There are cyber attacks, physical attacks, and also, we have been discussing this earlier on, political and economic pressure. So, and this again concerns also European member states of the European Union. The third point is the reaction. Of course, the reaction to the Charlie Hebdo attacks was global, but primarily it was French and European. And beyond the discussions, the contradictions, I think for a moment we found unity. People in the streets, those people were united in reaffirming our values, and because I think we're all aware of everything that we have to lose while, if we would give up on those values. Now, coming to the actions. Of course, you're all aware that there was a high-level group on media freedom that was established by the previous commissioner, Nelly Cruz, a few years ago. You're probably also aware that there were council conclusions on media freedom in the digital world that were approved in November 2013. So council means member states. So the member states of the European Union at unanimity said in a paper that there are threats and there are issues and challenges to freedom of the press in Europe. So that's already a first step. Now, when it comes to the follow-up, I will mention 4 main actions that we are carrying on. The first is, of course, the projects, among which the one that both Budapest and Florence institutes have been carrying during this year. And that are financed by the European Union. This is one among 4 projects that we have been financing this year. I would like to thank the European University Institutes and the other actors of this project for having informed the debate and having given practical supports to journalists through these projects. As you are probably aware, there's a new call for this year for the same kind of activities that is going through an evaluation phase. And on this, of course, I have the strict reservation not to say anything. The second aspect that the European Union has been financing is the Media Pluralism Monitor that is also being developed by and applied by the European University Institute. They freshly published a report. I invite everyone here who hasn't done it yet to go and check it on either our or their website. And then, of course, we know that also at policy level, there are sometimes challenges. For example, in the audiovisual field, there is certain stakeholders have pointed us to the issue of independence of audiovisual regulators, public regulators in member states. So we believe that the first step to ensure this independence was to formalize a group at European level to discuss issues such as their independence. And indeed, one of the first declarations that this group has been making was about their own independence. And then the fourth aspect I would like to mention when it comes to our activities is the issue of transparency of media ownership. And we have organized an exchange of views that also follow what the council conclusions of 1.5 years ago told us to do. That took place in October. The recordings are still online, so if you're interested, you can go and check them. So to conclude, Europe is frightened, but I think there is a global acknowledgement of how important freedom of speech is and how much this value concerns us all. Then again, we have discussed this earlier. The response cannot come from one side only, from the member states, from the industry, from the European Union, but it is like a common answer that shall be put in place. And concluding on our projects, I think again they have made the debate about freedom of the press more informed. And now the journalists have more tools at their disposals to deal with the problems that are out there. So I am quite satisfied that the European Union is financing all this. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriele, for this overview. I will add that I had the opportunity to meet with Commissioner Franz Timmermans some weeks ago. He's the Vice President of the European Commission. He's in charge of the Charter of Fundamental Rights. And I was really impressed by his strong political commitment to protect freedom of the press. And I should say that we feel, as a European journalist organization, the same kind of commitment in the office of the OSCE representative for freedom of the media. So, Aidar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ricardo. Good morning, everyone. I would like also to thank the organizers for the invitation, and it's a great opportunity to discuss the issue of safety of journalists, a topic that is extremely important for the work of our office. Just briefly about the activities, what the Office of the OSCE representative is. We are part of the organization, and there are three main institutions dealing with the human rights issues, and our office was established in 1997 when the participating states agreed that there is a need for a specialized institution to deal with the media freedom issues. And from the beginning of its work, the safety was like on the forefront of its activities. Based on the mandate, on a daily basis, the representative observes media freedom developments in all participating states, and there are 57 of them, and addresses serious problems caused by obstruction of media activities, including instances of intolerance by the participating states toward media. The current representative, Ms. Dunja Mijatović, and her predecessors, as well as many of our partners on among international organizations, addressed numerous events that aimed at bringing safety of journalists in the forefront of international attention. Unfortunately, the issue is still there, it's not improving, and almost on a daily basis we continue seeing various examples when journalists risk their lives, and Gabriel just mentioned several types of those violence against journalists. And it's not only about the journalists on their own, but also about their families, about their friends who also received threats, who also intimidated, and this also influenced the work of journalists on a daily basis and drives them sometimes toward the self-censorship and so on and so forth. To make the things worse, in far too many countries, the perpetrators and masterminds of these crimes remain free, and the issue of impunity was also raised by Ricardo in the beginning. And all these advances, self-censorship creates the chilling effect, and if not timely addressed, breeds further violence. And the developments in Ukraine, especially last year, is a clear example of this violence, of this widespread violence against journalists. Just wanted to make a remark on what Ricardo said about the killed journalists. You mentioned that several Russian journalists were killed by the shelling from the Ukrainian side. However, the problem is that there is still no thorough and transparent investigation. Basically, it's very difficult to verify which side is responsible for these attacks. Of course, I mean, the conflict is still ongoing, but we expressed hope several times that once the conflict is over, the authorities will do their best to, to find the responsible side. And apart from that, apart from the killings, again, talking about Ukraine, we should not forget about hundreds of journalists attacked in the beginning of the conflict when the demonstration and protest sparked in Kiev and the other cities of the country. And this has remained like a big problem still, although this is like in the area not affected by the ongoing conflict, but still the authorities by and large fail to investigate these cases. And we believe that it actually might result in further violence against journalists. In many areas of the OSCE, the authorities themselves also threaten the safety of journalists. And that's not only about Ukraine, but in many other OSCE participating states. When they report on the issues of public interest, when they attend the demonstrations, they are very frequently intimidated by the representatives of law enforcement. They are interrogated, they are detained, they are arrested, they are imprisoned on fabricated charges, the charges which the participating states usually say that not related to their work, such as hooliganism, drug sale, storage of weapons, and so on and so forth. But if you look at the broader picture, if you look at the trend, you see that there is more than that, and that this is actually something which the authorities do not tolerate. This is something which authorities want to silence. And these are real threats against real journalists, and these are people with names and families. And these are all cases that we at the office try to react on and to document in our reports. And there are several tools in the representative's disposal. She can raise her concern publicly. She can actually exchange letters with the participating states. She can also deliver her reports twice a year now to the Permanent Council, and it's like working body of the main working body of the organization, where the representatives of all 57 participating states meet every week in Vienna. What we see that, yeah, the journalists need more protection, obviously, and we think that first and foremost this should come from their own governments, as governments have a key role in bringing the much needed change in ensuring the safe working environment. And the problem is that while political commitments to protect media freedom are important, without their effective and timely implementation, they remain words on paper. It's only when politicians put necessary political will behind the commitments that they can change the situation. Unfortunately, today the political leadership and the will to turn these commitments into reality are still missing in many countries, and we, in our work, mainly focus on the OECD participating countries, but all European Union countries are part of it. Many governments continue to regard independent media as dangerous. Many believe that media need to be controlled and even silenced. And as a result, it has become a commonplace that many governments disregard the very commitments that they have voluntarily committed to or adopted. In addition, in many countries, media freedoms and freedom of expression are also limited through blocking or restricting access to the internet, through more traditional forms of censorship, through poorly drafted legislation, or legislation designed to restrict freedoms rather than to foster them. And one of the big issues that we always raise and we advocate for the solution is that free speech remains a subject to criminal prosecution in many OECD participating states, including less than a quarter of Council of Europe member states. And we're also seeing that criminal laws or legislation designed to fight terrorism used to restrict media freedoms and freedom of expression. And it's very disappointing that these countries with the longer democratic traditions fail to set a good example for the countries with less of that values or experience in that values. It remains important, however, especially for the organizations like ours, which has been given a mandate to monitor media freedom situation, to continue detecting worrisome trends, raising them publicly to the extent possible, and also increase the pressure on the countries for the things to improve. And to that end, our office is working closely with other international organizations, including the Human Rights Committee of the United Nations, the Council of Europe, UNESCO, all special rapporteurs on freedom of expression, as well as professional unions and human rights organizations. And in her work, the representative actually gathers, collects information in order to make a decision on her intervention, not only from participating states, but also from the bona fide sources, our partners, NGOs, media organizations on the ground. And all this work, all these declarations, resolutions, of course, remain an important point of reference in our work, in the work aimed at improving the safety of journalists. And in addition to daily monitoring activities, we also conduct several projects aimed at ensuring the safety of journalists. And if we go back 3 or 4 years ago, in 2011, together with the Lithuanian chairmanship of the OSCE, our organization organized a conference on the safety issues. And as a result, the participants adopted the Vilnius recommendations on safety of journalists. And this is a set of guidelines for national governments, legislatures, law enforcement agencies, and the media. Among other things, the recommendations suggest treating violence against journalists as a direct attack on freedom of expression, and to give full support to the strengthening media freedom by promoting safe working environment. The same year, Office has also published the Safety of Journalists Guidebook. It was authored by the Mr. William Horsley, one of the most well-known international experts in the field, and I'm sure most of you know him. And this book was updated last year. We issued a second edition of it, which is the copies of it available outside. And besides highlighting the gravity of the problems, the book also sets out related international standards and the government's responsibility to protect freedom of expression. In 2013, the office launched the End of Impunity global campaign to highlight the threats to journalists in the OSCE region. And it was originally initiated by the Commission for the Investigation of Murders of Journalists in Serbia, and then extended with our support. It includes a video in English, Russian, and Serbian, which is based on a series of threats, real threats that journalists in the OSCE region have received. This year, we are planning a conference on the safety of journalists, and the reporting in times of conflict, with the main focus on the media freedom situation in Ukraine. And this conference is scheduled to be held in June in Vienna. And for those interested, you can check our website for further information. So that's briefly about the activities of our office. So if you have any questions, I'm ready to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidar. It was important to raise the issue of Ukraine and Russia. We are organizing together a dialogue between the Russian Union of Journalists and the Ukrainian Unions of Journalists. You should know that journalism is the only civil society sector where we had the opportunity to build this kind of dialogue, so it's really important. So Sylvie, Pierluigi, Gabriele, and Aidar, before giving the floor to the participants, I would like to ask you another question. We've been talking about the horrific attack on Charlie Hebdo. Does this change your views on what should be done to protect journalists? I'm not asking about the views of your organizations, but your personal views. So I'm not asking you to talk about on the behalf of your organization. So what is the effect of this attack on your view, Sylvie?
I'm going to speak as Sylvie, and after maybe also a little bit as UNESCO. Of course, as a French, I was shocked. I was shocked because whatever, regardless what you think about the cartoons, even though you can call them offensive, provocative, disrespectful, it's a shock to kill someone. And you were speaking of values of democracy, but it's lives, I think, first of all. Secondly, the debate in France was a little bit bizarre because we heard a lot about limitations of freedom of expression, the question of blasphemy, and the question of regulations and new legislation on terrorism and so on. My feeling is also that the society is really fragmented, and it's not only the French society, it's also between societies. And one of the reply, and now I'm coming back as UNESCO, and we don't have an answer. We are still exploring ways. But maybe it's what you were speaking yesterday, Aidan, dialogue, because it shows also not only the fragmentation of societies, but also the diversity and the multiplicity and the diversity. So how media can if they have a role, but how we could enhance this dialogue among societies and not only among media themselves, because the issue is a societal issue. So the day or 2 days after the Charlie Hebdo, we organized an event with not only journalists, but also the religious in France. And I think it's important to develop this kind of discussion, also to make them understand what is the role of journalism in a society. And also, for the future, we should also work maybe a little bit more on media information literacy, I think, to address this issue in the curricula of schools, but also out of schools, because you have a lot of social media, which are going beyond schools. So all in all, we don't have an answer. I don't have an answer, but these are some plans where we could explore in the really very coming future.
Thank you, Pierluigi. Does this change your views?
Yes, of course, I speak on myself because I don't belong to the Council of Europe and I'm Italian representative, but I speak Pierluigi now. Yes, of course, there is a problem now about the balance between security and freedom of expression. So we should see what the states will do in this, which will be the loss of freedom after this kind of attacks, terrorist attacks. And on the other way, I was very impressed as a person by interviews done in Rome at the Islamic temple, mosque, I don't know the word in English, where they feel to be attached. I mean, they think that this is hate speech. What we say, it's hate speech. So it's a problem of internal limits to the freedom of expression that is involved. And this is very dangerous, because for me, yesterday, there were the two quotes, Papa Francesco and Salman Rushdie. I was more on the side of Salman Rushdie, but now we have to rethink about everything. This is my first impression. Then we will think about longer, I think.
Thank you, Gabriele.
Yeah, I have to make the disclaimer that I'm speaking in my personal capacity here. Yeah, it was with great sadness that I learned about the attacks. I am a bit of a Francophile myself, so it was a very tough day. I remember I went to a demonstration that very night in front of the European Parliament, and it looked like a funeral. So, and that was exactly the feeling that I felt on that day. Professionally, I think it gives a whole different meaning to our work, a whole different responsibility. But also the demonstrations of the 11th of January gave me a bit of hope, because I think there was a general reaction that was based on, of course, refusal of terrorism, but also refusal of hate. And I think this is very important to stress. And then again, personally, working for a European organization, working for European integration, becomes more of a responsibility and even a privilege, I would say, because I think our values that are backing the integration of Europe kind of gain visibility vis-a-vis the numbers that have been the core of the debate in the last years, legitimately. But I think it's also due time for the values to pop up again in the debate.
Thank you, Gabriele. Aidar, your personal view, briefly.
Well,
thank you.
Obviously, it's a horrible attack, and I mean, we all condemn the killing of journalists for the work they are doing. But there is also something which, I mean, this action apparently provokes the society to respond, and where we have fears, I mean, which were also mentioned during this roundtable, that, for instance, the legislation might be tightened when it comes to the counter-terrorism, extremism. On the other hand, we also see another sort of regulation which is coming in other countries, where they start kind of promoting and raising the issue of tolerance. And we already see examples where the regulators actually issue warnings to the media, and they actually threaten them to shut them down, because it's not something which can be tolerated in their society. Of course, this is a complex issue, although we should always bear in mind that freedom of expression is a fundamental right. But at the same time, in my personal capacity, I also have some mixed feelings, because I come from the part of the world, I'm from Central Asia, where these attacks were on the one hand condemned, on the other hand, it was very carefully addressed by journalists because, I mean, it's maybe difficult to explain, but there are certain issues when I think people connect to their values or traditions. They definitely condemn the attacks, the killings of innocent people, but they don't want to actually spark more debate or spark more violence, and they don't want to, for instance, to maybe publish the same cartoons in their own media. So it's also maybe the issue of solidarity of journalists. So on personal level, I have still very mixed feelings, but again, as I said, I mean, it's a horrible attack. This should be condemned, and it should be prevented in the future, of course. Thanks.
Thank you, Aidar. Thank you all. You've been delivering, I think, very wise comments on these events, the importance of dialogue, the balance, the needed balance between security, laws, and freedom, the refusal of hate. So I think it's time now to give the floor to the participants, and I have a first request from Aidan. So, please.
I'm just very brief. I mean, I think all of the statements have been really good and really useful, but one of the problems about it is that do people really believe it in Europe? Do they take seriously the well-meaning statements of the sort of the political institutions? Because they see there's a degree of hypocrisy, I think, sort of felt that one's calling for this, but the reality is something different. For example, on questions related to hate speech and the problem of media, there's a question about what are the international institutions doing themselves to curb hate speech in this political sphere, in which their membership is actually responsible for. Journalists and media basically repeat the hate speech of politicians mainly, and very often politicians who are exploiting public uncertainties and so on. That's a reality. You can't blame the media. So when regulators are issuing statements against media and actions against media, well, why aren't they doing it against political parties? Why aren't they doing it against sort of the political institutions? So it seems to me there's a real sort of disconnect between what we would like to happen and what's so. I mean, what are the states effectively? What are your members doing to properly confront what you might call the enemy within, which is destroying that sort of statement? And it seems to me that is absolutely linked to it. So I mean, I'd like to ask that. I mean, and I think on the question of impunity, the states are not doing enough on impunity and so on, and sometimes they're not even saying enough. I mean, I know that the Council of Europe and OSCE and UNESCO have done sort of quite a lot of work in this, but actually, in reality, the question of protection of journalists isn't high enough up the agenda. I mean, I think the European Union Council policy, which was announced, which you referred to, on press freedom and so on, it's very interesting if you examine that policy, that when it comes to the protection of journalists, it doesn't invite the member states to do anything, but it invites the European Commission to continue supporting programs on protection and safety of journalists. That's just not good enough. The European Union should be saying to its member states, you have to do more to protect journalists, not just protect audiovisual rights, not just sort of protect the landscape for the market to operate. So, I mean, it seems to me we have to look at what we're saying, examine it, and say what more has to be said, and also look internally. And I think that's something for journalistic institutions, absolutely. And that's one of the things we try to do. But the political institutions which you lead, or are part of the leadership of, seem to me have an extremely important role to play. And maybe this does give scope for more of the dialogue, which Sylvia was referring to.
More a comment than a question, of course. But I think Olaf has a question.
When it comes to safety of journalism, I would like to talk about money again. I apologize, because I think it is really connected quite closely. Also related to the institutional aspects, or the, let's say, advanced deinstitutionalization of journalism to a large extent. And I give you an example. I used to work for a big fat public broadcaster in Germany as an investigative journalist, which was very fortunate in many, many ways. First of all, when it comes to legal defense, I mean, I'm not talking so much about attacks from politicians, but think about big corporations, pharmaceutical companies. I mean, you make one phone call and you're dead, basically, not physically, but that's the end of your story. Except you have a big corporation, a broadcaster in your back and a legal department with it. So you are dealing much more on eye level, which makes a huge difference, number one. Number two is the luxury of not publishing. As a journalist, I mean, it happens that you are working on a story just to find out that this is not a story. And then to decide to just drop it and write it off is not only, I think, responsible and a matter of ethics, but it's also a business consideration, which you can only have and make inside an institution. Whereas if you're on your own, you would probably do anything you can to publish it. The third dimension, again, related to the safety of journalists is, I mean, I was assigned to a number of very hostile environments as a correspondent. And it makes a whole lot of a difference when it comes to taking risks if you are fully employed on a salary or if you paid per piece. So without sounding too cynical, I mean, if you're a desk editor, you are happy with, you know, mavericks out there offering pieces and taking lots of risks. But from a, you know, ethical point of view, as a journalist, I think the institutional frame and roof really makes a difference. And of course, also when it comes to equipment, I mean, simple things like, you know, helmet, flak jackets, but also being able to hire security personnel with you, which only works if you have the respective funding, which usually is much more likely in an institution rather than if you work as a one-man band. Thank you.
Again, I think it was most of all a comment than a question, but maybe some reaction from our panelists. Yes, Gabriele?
Yeah, I would like to reply to Aiden first. The last thing I would like to do as a Eurocrat is to regulate the political or party debate in Europe. This is really far from our intentions and will not happen. When it comes to hate speech, there are provisions in the Audiovisual Media Services Directive that regulate it. It's the directive that deals only with audiovisual, but across the whole of the European Union, and even further to a certain extent. So that's, I think, something that is within our hands, and it has been applied in the past in specific cases. And when it comes to the Council conclusions, Aidan, Council conclusions means conclusions drafted by Council members, so by member states. And indeed, they didn't address that specific aspect to themselves, but this is something that should rather be raised to themselves, because it's not something that we write ourselves. It's Council conclusions. And for Olaf, maybe I thought that maybe it's interesting to just give a bit of a visual image of one of the projects that we have been financing. I don't want to give any preference to any of those, but just because it's kind of related to what you said. One of our projects is, I mean, independent project, and I know that our friend from Oxygen is also here to say a few words in case he wants to add something, is about monitoring threats to journalists in Europe. And it has been a partnership between Index for Censorship, Osservatorio Balcani, and Ossigeno per l'Informazione. And it gives, yeah, that's the one. It gives a very good outline on outlook on how things are in Europe when it comes to threats to journalists. You see all these red dots, those are challenges that the journalists had to face. And they have been not only reported, but also kind of like, there was like a control on the validity of those reports. So yeah, that's it for now.
Actually, I'm very grateful that people from Council of Europe, OSCE, UNESCO, and the European Commission are here because, honestly, since I'm in this Committee on Safety of Journalists in the Council of Europe, and I'm working within these projects that are financed by the European Commission, I found that there are some projects that somehow are overlapping, and I think that this is an occasion to find possibilities of cooperation and to join the forces in order to have an effective instruments in this particular for these particular actions. Thank you.
Sylvie?
A very short reaction vis-à-vis what Hayden has said. I am working in the system since 25 years, and I can see the difference. And I know that sometimes it's very long, but it's since now 2 years, the international community is at least is speaking about the safety and impunity. Before it was silence. So I think it's important. What is also important is since 3 years where all the journalists, most of the journalists were killed, it's Iraq, Syria, and Somalia. And here you don't have a state. So it's quite difficult also to get information from these countries where it's completely diluted. So we have also to make a little bit more, the situation is of course very grave and still very concerning, but if we compare to 20 years ago, it's better.
Some more comments or questions? Yes, Aidar.
Yeah, just also a couple of comments. First on Aidan's reaction. When it comes to calling on the member countries, I mentioned in my speech about the political will, which is lacking in most of the participating states. And when it comes to the OSCE, we don't have any legally binding commitments, but they're all political. So basically, it's a club of countries which agree on certain principles. Among those commitments, we also have those related to the safety of journalists. However, what we also witnessed recently in last maybe 3 or 4 years, when the organization kind of was promoting and the participating states brought it on the table, the attempts to strengthen those commitments, to kind of repeating them in the annual ministerial council meetings, there was certain resistance from certain participating countries. I mean, so the countries are not ready to actually take additional commitment, although, I mean, as I said, they are not legally binding. So they raise a lot of questions. They raise the nature of journalism in this changing world and so on and so forth. Although they are not looking at the essence that there is a fundamental right of freedom of expression, there is a right to receive and impart information and so on. And commenting on what Olaf said, which is like a very important issue, but I think this also touched upon many other issues, and maybe they're not only discussed in the European Union, but should also be looked at the broader scope when it comes to the transparency, to the ownership of media outlets, to the accountability of the government on the money they spend, because subsidies probably could be good for public broadcasters in many countries, but we also witness subsidies as a tool to control the whole media sphere. And whenever you raise the issue, you hear that this is the state responsibility to ensure that society receives all sorts of information, and that's how they kind of help for people. And when it comes to the safety, or physical safety of journalists, we also need to, of course, look at the broader scope. And I think it was also mentioned in the UN plan of action that there are root causes. There are issues like corruption, organized crime, I mean, as long as all these issues are on the table, it's very difficult to move forward and do something, practical to ensure the safety of journalists. Thank you.
Mario.
Yes, and something that just popped into my mind as Ada was talking. We certainly have to look at safety of journalists in war-like situations. But it's just a matter of fact that in this country, we have a number of working journalists that are being daily escorted by police because they are threatened by organized crime. This is supposedly one of the big Western Europe countries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe we have the time for a last question to stay in the schedule. Yeah? Michael?
Gabriel, is that 234 for Hungary? 224 for Hungary?
Maybe we can show the result for...
224
yes.
for Hungary.
Is represent that specific area. I don't know if it coincides with the country, but I guess to a
because it's just.
I think there is a tool to.
You have access to national reports.
Yeah,
if you
okay.
click on the.
Exactly. Okay.
Okay, now you can see it. Thank you. No more question and comment. I'm not going to try to draft any conclusion on this debate, on this issue. I will give the floor to Pierluigi, who is supposed to give us the conclusion of the whole seminar. So good luck, Pierluigi.
Thank you. No, I mean, it's clear this kind of debate is an open debate and it's impossible to draw conclusions. Let me only briefly summarize what we have done. Okay, first, let me say that this was again the last conference of a program that had the duty to design instruments to strengthen journalism in Europe, trying to design tools, networking, and training. I think we have done this in this year. The program is successful, not only our part of the program, but also other parts, because somehow the Commission managed to have this program as run by different organizations in a kind of coordinated manner. And I think this was helpful. And I think we have developed some instruments that will remain, and we'll do our best to keep this working in the future. We'll see also with the Commission how things will go, but we will do our best to continue. Then we're very happy, and we thank again Michael Baird, Larissa Rankovic, and Emanuel Haddad for their contribution, for the award. We thank also a lot of other young freelancers and young journalists and female journalists that participate, send ideas, and we hope to have an occasion to continue also this in a sense. I mean, it's not, it was little money, but it's the effort, the idea that somehow with a commission program is an example, if you want, to push investigative journalists to have new things written, new investigation built, to new ideas. I think it was very nice, and also we enjoyed the work. By the way, let me thank also the colleagues that spend their time to evaluate the proposals and so on. Aidan is here, but also the other colleagues. Instead we had then these three discussions on the challenges for journalism, on the status of journalists across Europe, and now this last discussion on safety. Let me say, I obviously don't want to conclude anything. I cannot conclude on this, but let me, if I want to summarize and somehow systematize the way in which I perceive these discussions, we are seeing two different issues. Obviously, they are very close and they touch each other, but we are seeing two challenges generally here. One challenge is to the media enterprise, and the other challenge is to journalists and to their profession. And these two challenges obviously are close, but maybe can help if we manage to think to them in a different way and to develop the issue of both of them. The first is an issue, if you want, of money, as was said, of business model, certainly. And it's not only the media enterprise that is under pressure, because we know that with the internet and the internet revolution, we are seeing many important things happening, positive things, but certainly we are seeing also the disruption of many industries. Industries sometimes very far from the technological world, but then certainly the technological industries are the most impacted by this revolution. And now we know that the telecommunication companies are under a heavy pressure, and it's a bit paradoxical that telecommunication companies that have they are the most closer, if you want, to the internet revolution are among the ones that are getting more and more in danger with their business model under pressure. And if you think to this way, you can have a way to read also the crisis of the media enterprises, because also their internet is a very powerful way to exchange information, to develop information, and puts under pressure the business model of the media, of the traditional media enterprise. You see, there is some irony in this, what is happening, but it's not happening only to the media enterprises, it's happening to the telecommunication companies, and it's happening all around in other different industries that are under pressure. The real question here, obviously I have no answer, even if this is one thing we are studying a lot, also at the Florida School of Regulation, Communications and Media is one of our major topic, the internet influence on other industry of the telecommunications and media. One thing on which we are certainly thinking is what is substitutable and what is not. What is the part of the industry that will remain? And so it's only a question of how we'll reorganize in the end. That is a little bit what was discussed before about looks like most of the money is still there. The question is who is getting it and how is using it, how is reinvesting or not. This is really the question of the last few years. In telecommunication is the key question, but in media is also the key question. So you see here there is a lot of pressure on the traditional media industry, and we are probably in a situation in which we don't see clearly how the future will organize. So what we hope is that we will have the traditional media industry will have enough time to adjust to this change. It's not easy. It's not an easy change. But one thing we feel that the work they used to do is something that is essential, that remains, that is essential for society, for democracy, for the working of our societies. So in a sense, is a transition. In the end, there will be another way to organize information, but still there will be need to, as Aidan was saying, constrained freedom of expression. That means organized freedom of expression. So I think that the media enterprise has a future. The question is, we don't see it very clearly today because we are under a heavy transition that is impacting a lot of industry and especially the media enterprise. In a sense, the media enterprise probably was the first that was impacted so deeply. So it's at the frontier. Probably it's the one that will come out first, we hope, from this transformation. But there is a lot of work to do and a lot of things to be understood, and certainly we will continue to study this topic. Then, and there's a parallel word, obviously, but very close, very similar, is the pressure on the journalist profession, on what is happening to this profession. And here, even one thing was said, maybe we need a new test to understand what is a journalist. I really agree, because that's really the question. We have some difficulty to understand what is a journalist, but I really like the idea that the journalist profession and its trade unions, its organizations, and so on, have to open as much as possible to these new ways to do journalism, and because even there is an evolution. And so from this evolution, in the end, we'll probably get answers also to the new profession. Clearly, this evolution has risks, and this final discussion about safety of journalists clearly is an important discussion. And to my mind, freelance journalists are even more exposed than normal journalists. The more you are alone, the more you are without an organization with you every day, the more you risk if you take chances and if you try to do investigative journalism or to challenge difficult situations or war areas or things like this. So somehow I think that institutions are very important in trying to accompany, protect, build trust for this transformation of the journalistic profession. So I think institutions will have more responsibility in the next periods than probably they had before, when the industry was more orderly. Now that the industry is more complex, and they probably, as often happens, some institutional help and some institutional protection becomes more important. And so also knowledge and trust building is very important in this phase, I think. Okay, I know that I couldn't conclude on anything. I could just summarize. Let me conclude thanking all of you a lot for this participation. We were very happy that you came to our final conference. Let me thank the staff of the CMPF and Alessandra Caldini also that helped to organize this event. And I think we'll keep in touch and we'll do other things on this. Thank you very much.